Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everybody here. Thank you for joining us. This panel is called Can't Look Away. I think it's about social media and the dangers that it poses to children. I think at some level, all of us have a sense that social media can be bad for kids, but I think most of us don't know just how terribly bad it can be. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's also called Can't Look Away because so often these social media platforms and algorithms are actually designed so that kids actually can't look away. So here's some of the data. Teens use social media. 1/3 of young people report using social media almost constantly. 3.3 billion people use Meta's products daily, and 5 million snaps are sent on Snapchat every day. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of what we're working with. I want to introduce you to our panelists. On my left is Olivia Carville. Olivia is a wonderful Bloomberg investigative reporter. She focuses on the dangers of social media and online safety. Matt O'Neill is a documentary filmmaker and journalist, and Matt and I are working on a documentary for Bloomberg called Can't Look Away about this very topic. And last, but absolutely not least, and I make this last because John DeMay tragically lost his 17-year-old son, Jordan, in a sextortion scam, which he was blackmailed on Instagram. And I paused, John, because it is such a brave thing to be able to come here and share the story of your beautiful son, Jordan. And we know it's not easy, and we are so appreciative. And obviously, John does that so that everybody can learn about what's going on online. So thank you, John. Pleasure. Olivia, I want to start with you because the documentary and so much comes out of your extraordinary reporting on actually what's going on right now with social media and young people. And as I said before, I think that we all have some sense that social media can be really bad for kids, but not the full scope of what's going on. Talk to us a little bit about your reporting.
Yeah, thanks, Perri. And it's so great to be here today. I think this is such an important topic. I'd like to start with the trajectory of social media. When you think about these platforms, they were created in the early 2000s or 2010s, and they were designed to be a cool way to hang out online and connect with your friends and family. But when we think about how social media has changed, in the past 6 or so years, we've seen these platforms shift into algorithmically driven machines that are really designed to keep users glued to the screen for as long as possible. During that shift, these companies have become incredibly successful. Hundreds of millions of people are using these platforms on a daily basis. Just today alone, there are going to be 34 million posts uploaded to TikTok. So how can you possibly moderate the content on these platforms when they've grown this big? So I think it's important to remember that with that success comes consequences. And tragically, those consequences are often most acutely felt with the youngest users. And so the other thing that's really changed is the way young people, kids and teens, are using these products. This has really become the social fabric of their lives. They don't call you on the cell phone, they snap you or they DM you. And when we think about the harms that have been caused by social media, as you said, Perri, for over a decade, experts, researchers, academics have talked about the ways in which social media may cause mental health harms like depression or sadness, or how Snapchat's beauty filters may cause body dysmorphia or eating disorders. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we have seen hundreds of families stand up, speak out, and file lawsuits, alleging that social media is partly to blame for their child's death. And that is where the conversation or the question has changed. It has shifted from, is social media like going to make my child happy or sad, to is social media dangerous or even potentially deadly for children?
Unfortunately, when we use the word deadly, that's what happened to John, to your beautiful son. And I say that because he was extraordinary. You'll have an opportunity to talk about him in a second. I want to run a short clip from Can't Look Away so that you can get a sense of what happened to Jordan DeMay.
Within the first couple hours, usually we can figure out the reason why it occurred. But in this particular case, the obvious answers were not present. You got someone like John DeMay, the former prom king, the football star, the basketball star, and you wonder how can this happen to someone? When you start reading these transcripts and looking at the interaction between the suspect and Jordan from Instagram, I mean, I guess you can see why. Jordan thought he was talking to a girl by the name of Danny Roberts, and it wasn't until the extortion started that he then realized that who he thought he was talking to was not reality. It's just kind of like a banter back and forth. And then eventually they disclose that they want to trade some pictures. So at the point that Jordan had sent some naked images of himself, a suspect account came back with this statement. I have screenshotted all your followers and tags and can send this nudes to everyone and also send your nudes to your family and friends until it goes viral, ... All you have to do is to cooperate with me and I won't expose you. Are you going to cooperate with me? Just pay me right now. They don't want to give that victim time to think. They're going to put that pressure on until they comply. Jordan responded with, I'm killing myself right now because of you. The perpetrator says, good, do that fast, or I'll make you do it. I swear to God. I mean, once this starts, it just doesn't slow down. That's the scary part of this whole thing. It was roughly 6 hours from the time of initial contact to the point where Jordan had killed himself.
There's a lot of things that went wrong that night, but ultimately, Instagram is the reason it happened. Social media is the reason it happened.
John, thank you for sitting through that. I hate when we reduce somebody into a few things, and I think that as I read the media around Jordan's death, it was that he was a basketball star, he was the homecoming king, he was obviously so many things, that more than that, he was your son. Tell us a little bit about who Jordan was.
Yeah, Jordan was an amazing young man, as you can see. I mean, that's what the outside world gets to see, but he was my only son. You know, we shared the passion of the gym together and going to the beach, the Florida beaches, a couple times a year, and just getting out and living life. And he was just such a great young man. He had a very diverse group of friends. He was the kind of guy that would help the lady who dropped her books walking up the stairs. And unfortunately, as a parent, I didn't get to learn a lot of those other things that were outside of our home until his funeral, when thousands of people came and dozens of young people who Jordan had not even met personally were saying such beautiful things at his funeral about what kind of a person he was, and that was a testament to who that young man was.
Can you talk about, John, the last line in that clip is that you blame Instagram for what happened to Jordan. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, there's not enough time in the day to explain all the reasons, but in general, you know, I live in a small community in northern Michigan on the South Shore of Lake Superior. It's 30,000 people. We don't have to lock our doors there. I grew up there and I never locked a door in my life. I leave my wallet in my truck and it's there every time I get up in the morning. That's the area that we live in. And, you know, we do secure our home and we are a secure family. And unfortunately, social media gives these criminals a platform to come in your home in the middle of the night when you're sleeping and do horrible things like what happened to Jordan.
It's so true. It's so true. And Olivia, I think that what's meaningful is that's Instagram, right? That is sextortion on Instagram. That is just one of the things that is happening across so many of these platforms. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening across these other platforms and why these large social media companies seem relatively impervious.
It's a great question. So, you know, to the first point, I mean, sextortion is one of the issues that we've seen. Tragically, it's impacted 12,000 children across this country have been targeted by sextortionists, and it's led to dozens of suicides. We're seeing these numbers come up in lawsuits and being released by the FBI. But beyond that, there is also cases where children have been sent harmful content by algorithms promoting or glorifying suicide, essentially showing them how to commit suicide, the method of suicide. We're also seeing drug dealers using platforms to connect with teenagers and sell them prescription pills which are laced with fentanyl, resulting in overdoses across the country. So a number of cases have been filed across the US, and many of these, we saw recently, just earlier this week, TikTok, 14 state attorney generals have filed lawsuits against TikTok, but a few months ago you saw 42 state attorney generals sue Meta. We've also seen school districts filing lawsuits against the platforms, alleging mental health harms and addiction. We also have law firms like the Social Media Victims Law Centre, which I believe is representing you, John. That, this law firm, they represent thousands of families across the country and hundreds of wrongful death cases. And what's different about the lawsuits that we're seeing filed today is that they're trying to sidestep or challenge Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And this is like a liability shield. It is blanket immunity for these platforms, so they cannot be held liable or accountable for the content that is posted on their sites. So Snapchat can't be held liable for a drug dealer posting a drug menu on its platform, for example. But what's different or unique about these cases is in order to try and get around Section 230, they're arguing this is not about the content. This is about the product themselves. This is about the design of the platforms that was defective or dangerous. And I think that Social Media Victims Law Centre are really leading that charge. And if I could, I would love to take a question, Perri. You and Matt have taken on this topic head on to create this film, Can't Look Away. And I'd love to know, or I'm curious, what was it that drew you to this subject matter? And why did you think that the Social Media Victims Law Centre was the right vehicle to tell this story?
I think to answer the back part of your question first, because there's two buckets of why this is an important opportunity from our point of view of filmmakers. And when it comes to story, the work that John's doing, the work that all of these other parents who have suffered these incredible tragedies are doing to put themselves out in the public eye, to tell the story of their children and what they went through is really important. It's also heartbreaking and very difficult for me as a parent to watch, to understand, for you all to think about your families and loved ones. Inside these lawsuits and inside the work that John and the other parents featured in this film are doing is a hope for real, meaningful change. That it is not hopeless. This is not a fait accompli. This is a dynamic situation. With every new technology comes new opportunities and new dangers. The dangers here are real, and we're following for the better part of 2 years, an effort that combines the civil justice system with parental activism and engagement to tell this story. And we see it happen in real time. So we're with the parents in the room as they're pushing their investigation. We're with the lawyers as they're arguing in court. And it shows the potential for change. And that's the story side of why we feel this is so important and so urgent. I also want to point to, as filmmakers, the Bloomberg side of this. We're investigative documentary journalists, filmmakers, whatever label you want to put on us. We like the journalism part of filmmaking. And investigative programming, as many people in this room know, is more and more difficult to do in this environment. So to have be rooted in your reporting, Olivia, but not just your reporting, the entire Bloomberg newsroom's infrastructure and expertise, and very specifically from the executive producer of this film and executive editor Kristen Powers, helping us and Bloomberg work together as independent filmmakers to bring that expertise and that journalism, because there's lots of activism to be done, there's lots of warnings to be raised, but most importantly, if we're going to have a changing situation, we have to root it in fact, in responsible reporting that's responsible not only to the tragedies that have unfolded, but also to the companies that are being put in the eye of scrutiny.
Yeah, and I would just add to that sometimes we would talk about, well, why do you need a documentary when you've got Olivia's incredible body of reporting? And the truth is, in a story as enormous as what we're talking about here, we're talking about something akin to the tobacco story, the opioid story, and now what's happening on social media. It is going to take a full-on media onslaught to educate people across the country, albeit around the world, about what's going on, because it is just that horrific and people don't understand it. However, I want to keep an eye on the time because what so often I feel happens when you're talking about these terrible, terrible stories is that you lay it out there and then you tell everybody just like, have a good day and have lunch. But so we don't want to end this conversation without making sure that, and John, I'm going to begin with you. You are spending a lot of time talking to audiences, different kinds of audiences, about what's going on. What does everyone in this room, or people who are watching it on streaming, what do they need to know so they can help better navigate their own lives, their children's lives, a life that they touch that is a child's life?
I think the most important thing, the 30,000-foot view, is that social media is not your friend, right? It's not there to protect you, even though when Mark Zuckerberg goes to, and the other CEOs that go to Capitol Hill that I attended in January and says all these wonderful things that they claim to be doing on their platforms, it's not enough. And even for adults, we don't even have the adult conversation because there's not enough time. We have to spend all of our energy just trying to protect our youth from the crimes that are happening on social media. It's a full-time job for millions of people, and we're not winning yet. So if that says anything to you about what's happening in the social media world, I don't know what else can. So I think that the most important thing for parents to understand is that you need to be more proactive in dealing with your children's use on social media, when they get a phone, when they go on social media, how they're using it. Are you being a good parent and watching what they're doing on their phones and reading their text messages? Because that's what needs to happen. It's very dangerous. You're giving the entire planet in the fingertips of your 14 and 12 and 13-year-old daughters. Are you okay with that? Would you let your 14-year-old daughter walk into a strip club down the street? No. Then why would you let them on social media? Because frankly, the strip club down the street is probably more protected. There's security, there's cameras, there's rules, there's guidelines. There's none of that on social media. And they're not doing what they need to do on the business end of that stick to make sure that those kids are safe. So I think that's just really important because a lot of parents, and I'm guilty of it too, right, until this happened to me, is we kind of just sit back and like, we're doing dinner, I run a real estate company and we're busy and we're doing all these things and we're all, shuffling, travel this and travel that. I don't care, go on your phone, go in your room, get out of my hair, we got to make dinner because we got to go to soccer practice, right? And we need to stop and think and we need to slow down. And I think one thing that I learned too that I'm hearing a lot from the federal agents and investigators that are dealing with this on a daily basis, there seems to be one common denominator a lot with these tragic stories is that it's seclusiveness with the phones. You should not have your teenager in their bedroom at night with their phone. Every single one of these stories, there's over 24 suicides, including my son in the last 2 years, just from sextortion, that was reported. So that's probably a fraction of the actual numbers. It's probably in the thousands that we don't even know about. The only reason I know about my case is the extortionist happened to send one picture to his girlfriend and tried to extort her, which actually is a normal operating procedure for them. But that one picture gave us evidence to track down 4 Nigerian men, which resulted in 3 extraditions for the first time in United States history, 2 of which were pled guilty and were sentenced in my hometown 2 weeks ago, and they're doing 18 years in prison. So my message to you, if you're in the tech world and you're not protecting kids online, I'm coming for you. And if you're in another country and you think you're going to hide behind our ocean, wrong, we're coming for you. We have airplanes gassed up and ready to go, and the government is building relationships and making sure this stuff is going to stop. But it starts here with the people in this room, people that are sharing Jordan's story. I mean, we couldn't do this. I mean, there's no way we could get this voice out here, but we have to do something. And I think the biggest thing is Section 230 is the impetus of what we need to change. We have to create a fissure in that because right now they have blanket immunity to do whatever they want. And they're going to hide behind that every time versus having to go to their shareholders and explain what they're doing with their company because their numbers are going to go down when they start wiping cleaning out house in their platforms that are probably 30, 40, 50% fake and fraudulent accounts anyway. So there's a lot of that stuff going on in the back end. So I think that's the biggest thing is we need to find a way to address Section 230. If I'm running a successful real estate company, which I have for 17 years, I don't get sued. And if I do, I walk into the court and I put my shirt and tie on and I go in there and I win because I know I'm doing things right. Mark Zuckerberg and the other CEOs are hiding behind Section 230 and they don't want it to go away because they know if they have to do that same thing, they're not going to win. And they're going to get sued for hundreds of millions of dollars by every single parent and every single victim out there, and they will lose their business in about 30 days.
John, I'm going to jump in because that ties into an audience question I think I want to make sure that we have time for. And Olivia, I'm going to ask it of you. John just mentioned the hearings, right? We've all seen those hearings where the social media platform heads are pulled down in front of Congress and questioned. There's lots of sound bites that get played on television. The question from the audience, Olivia, why do you think governments have been unable to regulate social media to further extent?
I mean, there's been a lot of effort in this area. We've seen over in the EU, the Online Safety Act or the Digital Online Safety Act being passed to try and do just this. We're also seeing COSA and various pieces of legislation trying to be passed here, but it's difficult to get anything through Congress right now. And for so long, social media companies have operated with this kind of immunity shield. They haven't had to face any of these liability claims, and that's where all these lawsuits come into it, and that's why it's so important. So I think there have been efforts to try and regulate, but there's a lot of confusion around the best way to do that. It is a challenging conversation and question. How do you say what is a piece of content that should or shouldn't be allowed on social media? Often the defense is, should a piece of content about depression be allowed to go up online? The companies will argue that if you silence that or censor it, you're not allowing people to talk about the harms of depression or the emotions that they're feeling. But what happens if that piece of content goes to a child who is struggling, who ultimately does watch that video or look at that piece of content and take their own life? Who's to blame for that? The question comes, what role and responsibility do we want to place on these companies? And what responsibility do we want to place on lawmakers or parents, as John pointed out? And I think one of the big challenges is with all of these lawsuits that are being filed, we have no idea what the likelihood is going to be of even one of them to succeed. To be honest, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to succeed because of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. But what we have seen is these cases and families like John's speaking out, they have raised some uncomfortable truths that are impossible to ignore. They have changed the conversation and they have pressured these companies to take action and actually make their products safer. We recently saw Instagram announce teen accounts, which they hadn't done up until this year, create like sleep mode for kids. So from 10 p.m. until 7 a.m. you don't get sent notifications. Isn't that something we should have had years ago? I mean, it's great that it's happening now, and it's happening because of families like John speaking out. And
can I add to that real quick? And I know we're out of time and we got to go, but I think it's really important to understand that there's two avenues, right? We can make change in this wonderful country with litigation in the civil side, right? And we can also make it with legal change at the Senate level and creating bills. COSA, Kids Online Safety Act, was in the Senate, passed the committee 100%. Every Republican and Democrat in the committee voted to have it. It went to the actual Senate for the vote, 93 to whatever, 2-4. So it's very popular, but here we are stalled in the House and it's struggling. And in COSA isn't like this super bill that's going to make a bunch of change. It's just a very decent piece of common sense legislation that's failing. And that's the problem. So going back to the civil litigation side, anybody that owns businesses in here, which I'm sure a lot of you all do, you know that as soon as you get sued for some money, guess what? Things are going to have to change, right? Immediately, you're talking to your PR people. We got to make a change. We screwed up here, or we got to adjust. We got to pivot, and that's the only thing that's going to make social media companies make those changes. And the problem is they have all the changes ready to go. The emails are out there. Their whistleblowers are out there. They're telling us it's all there. Age verification, they could do it in a minute because they have every single piece of information. They could track IP addresses. There's no reason why one IP address should be hosting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20, 100 different Facebook accounts at the same time. Flag it, figure it out. They have the technology built, ready to go, so when these things come down the line via either legislation or a civil lawsuit, they have it ready to implement. They're ready to pivot at any moment, but they're choosing not to implement it until they absolutely have to because they hide behind Section 230 and make sure things are looking good for their shareholders. And that's what we're dealing with.
Thank you, John. Also, change doesn't happen without people like you sharing their stories. They're really difficult stories to share. That is how change begins as well. So, John DeMay, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was told by one of my great mentors in life, never keep an audience from going to lunch. And I know that you have an announcement about lunch. Anyway, Matt, thank you for being here as well. Olivia Carville, investigative reporter for Bloomberg, thank you. And now...
Thank you, Perri. Yeah, so lunchtime, guys. Thank you so much for being a great audience. And you can make your way through to the Hub for bites from two of LA's hottest chefs, I'm told. And we'll pick back up on the stage at 1:15 p.m. sharp with a live version of Hot Ones. Thank you.
That's what an investigative reporter does.